drawn to stories early on. My dreams would light up my imagination, and you had nightmares night and day. Yeah, but with the clicker, I chased those frights away. Ooh, you, so true. So here is the clue of hope to remember. Visions they come true. A band the lights will steal. So many the champion of life.
Man, we need more games like Alan Wake 2, and we need more developers like Remedy. Holy hell, this is my favourite game of the year by a long way. And that's not for lack of competition. In fact, there's been plenty, there's been tons. Spider-Man 2, Zelda. Just you wait until I find the time to go back and play Baldur's Gate 3. It's been an absolutely insane year, just overall, for video games. But for me, Alan Wake 2 has been the peak, the absolute tippity top. And that is partly because I've had a bit of a journey through the Remedyverse over the last 2 months. I'd never played Alan Wake before or Control, but all the trailers, concepts, and early gameplay stuff we got for Alan Wake 2 drove me into a bit of a frenzy. It was exactly all the kinds of things I'm into, especially all the very cerebral storytelling and supernatural horror aesthetics. I was very drawn into all of it. Fortunately, I had unconsciously prepared for this day, having already acquired Alan Wake and American Nightmare, which, for those of you that don't know, it's like a fun little side game to Alan Wake. It's not canon though, you don't need to play it, but it's fun. So I finally dipped my toes in, figuring I was at least going to like it, but I could not have expected the outcome. I came out with not one, but two new favourite games, as that was all of 5 minutes before finishing Alan Wake and purchasing Control, which I ended up loving even more. I have never in my life hunted down sheets of paper so seriously. I personally can't name a development studio, certainly not of this scale, that is so pinpoint focused on telling a story. Now that might sound stupid, after all a fair majority of games tell a story, but few have it as such a primary concern. Just about every aspect of Alan Wake and Control is there to serve the narrative. To Remedy, games just seem to be another art form, another way to tell stories, which is especially clear given the whole premise of Alan Wake. I think it's why their games can be so wildly different in genre and gameplay styles, but they still have a distinctly Remedy feel. Lots of vibrant world building, the increasing inclusion of live action, and at least one musical number have quickly become staples that centre these unique experiences. If we take a look back at Alan Wake, the most 2010 thing about that entire experience is the Oh Dear Diner thermoses you can collect around the game's levels, which as far as I can tell, only give you some achievements. There is no actual benefit to collecting them. Outside of that, everything feels very diegetic. It feels from inside the game. You aim with your torch, your weapons are all taken from you at several points dictated by the narrative, and the game is even structured like a TV show, which does an amazing job at bookending the levels. Then there was Control, which took everything like 17 steps further. I have never seen a game go so far out of its way to justify game mechanics. Checkpoints, they're there to stabilise the oldest house. Enemy variety as you progress, here is file upon file, theorising and explaining their differences and changes. You can construct mods from materials. The probably alien board has given you a gift, be grateful, you cheeky little shit. It is truly next level stuff. And now we've arrived at Alan Wake 2, the first truly official game in the Remedy connected universe, and a sequel some people have been waiting 13 years for, and they really didn't hold back, which is something you can see in the decision to go full survival horror. See, the first game is a horror game, but mostly in tone, in its theme, in the events of its narrative. It is quite literally a horror story come to life, after all. But gameplay wise, it's much more action oriented. Plenty of ammo, weapon variety, upgrades, stuff like that. You can even cheese the combat. If you boost your flashlight for a split second, enemies will still enter their little hide from the light animation. You can just take pot shots at them. A feature that was swiftly removed in American Nightmare. But the sequel doesn't just have you combat the horror story, you are surrounded by it. Ammunition is scarce for both protagonists, there were fewer enemies in general but they hit a hell of a lot harder and take more bullets to go down, and your flashlight is now a resource you really need to be worried about. Becoming a survival horror game has completely changed the nature of the threat, but it goes further than just altering the combat. The camera is a hell of a lot closer, you move a hell of a lot slower, and the amount of shots I missed absolutely skyrocketed. The environments in general became so much more tense, and thus so did I. This shift to survival horror was an excellent move for the game. Not only is it much more in keeping with the whole vibe, but it also adds a lot more to the game that just fits. There's a more backtracking, puzzle-based nature this time around that gets more out of its areas and promotes that risk-reward of going out of your way to get extra resources and explore the map, and it generally just oozes more threat with the taken. And very interestingly for me personally, it affects both characters differently. As you may know, Alan Wake 2 took the dual character approach, with Alan's escape from the Dark Place after 13 years being one half of the game. The other follows FBI agent Saga Anderson, who has been called to Bright Falls to investigate the cult of the tree and their ritualistic murders. Playing out like a gritty detective story, Saga takes Alan's role from the first game. She's been dragged into the story and has to figure out what's going on and how to stop it, becoming intertwined with Alan in the process. Now, Saga's gameplay is arguably more what is expected of the genre. It feels quite reminiscent of something like the Resident Evil remakes. Lots of forest trails, dark and abandoned corridors, and puzzle solving / progression that is relatively literal. Relatively. Very, very relatively. Whereas Alan's half of the game takes place within the Dark Place, which portrays itself as a twisted reflection of New York. Reality doesn't follow the rules here, and the tension is much thicker as the world around Alan continues to fight back. Never mind these jackasses. Many of the Dark Place's occupants are just there for decoration. They whisper at you and occasionally jump you, but they're completely harmless. You do not want to waste your resources on these ones. So when one shows up at the end of a corridor and you don't know if it's going to smack you with a pipe or not, just keep coming. Just have your heart medication on hand, that's all I'm saying. Moment-to-moment gameplay between Alan and Saga is very much the same, with the major differences being weapon selection and general resource availability. The atmosphere itself is completely different. And I think the clearest way to see the difference between them is within the Mind Place and the way it influences the general gameplay loop. Now, the Mind Place is exactly what it sounds like, and now I think about it, it might be Mind Palace. I can't remember and can't be able to look it up. It's a manifestation of what's going on in their heads. For Saga, this takes on the appearance of the field office. It's a place for her to consolidate information and form conclusions, and it's somewhere you spend quite a lot of your time. You can review found pages, radio shows, and the truly insane TV ads. I think this is the weirdest like the live action short stuff has got, and I'd say that being fully aware of the Threshold kids. You can also get upgrades here and Profile, which is basically Saga being a next level genius at guessing, but this is Remedy and there is much more to that particular thread. Then there's the caseboard. I like the caseboard, though it does take some getting used to. The caseboard allows us to track all of the major plot threads, including stuff like collectibles, but in a very interactive manner. As you go through the game, as you find clues and get key pieces of information, it will generate these cards that you can place on the caseboard. Put the card in the right place and it will create a link and allow Saga to come to a conclusion. A lot of the main questline progression is done through this act. You don't have to find literally every piece, there are mandatory ones, but you'll know when you've got enough as it says deduction available in the corner when you can progress. It can seem tedious on the surface, and I have no doubt that to some it will be, but I personally felt like Sherlock Holmes seeing all the pieces come together, and it makes the plot twists so much juicier when you had every piece of information you needed to figure it out. Even post finishing the game, I kind of want to go back and finish it. I want to fill it all out. Especially the Alex Casey lunchboxes that are scattered around Bright Falls that you can find to get weapon upgrade materials and stuff. You can also find clues as to who is leaving them. I'm 99% sure I know who it is, but I don't have confirmation and it's kind of driving me nuts. Alan's Mind Place, on the other hand, is significantly different. It's much more bare bones and reminiscent of the writer's room from the Cauldron Lake cabin. A typewriter sits on his desk, which he uses to write Initiation, the manuscript that he is using to attempt to get through the Dark Place, and then he has the plot board. But the plot board has only one thing in common with the caseboard, and that is that it is a board. Alan's goal is to manipulate the Dark Place to get where he needs to go. He does this through different drafts of Initiation and by going through different murder sites. These murder sites are seen through the guise of an Alex Casey mystery, the fictional detective in Alan's books, and are divided into scenes. But as they are now, the scenes will not allow Alan to progress. He has to search the scene for inspiration and apply it at the plot board, allowing Alan to rewrite the scene and push forward in an awesome display of reality alteration right in front of our eyes. Seriously, I never got bored of this. So one half of the game is a dark detective thriller and the other is a mind-bending, reality-defying trip through a neon hell. And I must say, these two halves of the game, they complement each other very well. There was a part of me that was curious how they were going to merge things because the differences between Alan and Saga's parts of the game are immense, and there's only so much you can assume about the narrative, but it drip feeds information and plot beats and stuff extremely well. I'm not going to give any major spoilers, but I am going to talk about structure for a bit. So there was a big deal before the game came out about being able to choose the order you play the chapters in. Now that is true for the middle of the game, the midsection. The first and last couple chapters are in a designed order, and I assure you that is for the best. You start the game as Saga, you learn about her, the case, you learn how to play the game, and all that jazz before we are reintroduced to Alan and his plight. It's much healthier for newer players, and it gets both stories to a starting point, so to say. Once the game tells you about the magic cleaning bucket, you can swap realities and play the game however you want until it's like, past here you're ours, beware. I'm not going to talk about the final chapters because they're all evil, and do not even get me started on the ending, but for that midsection, you are free. I personally went back and forth every couple chapters, but there was a part of me that wondered how different the experience would be playing as far as you could with one character first. How much of an impact would that have? But honestly, I think I played it in the best way possible. There are parts of the story that concern overlaps, which are basically points of contact between the Dark Place and reality, mostly in Saga's portion of the game. These overlaps contain veiled interactions between Alan and Saga that have a massive impact on the narrative, and all but one of them occurred in Saga's story before Alan's for me. This effectively gave Alan's story the role of contextualizing what is happening in Saga's, and giving me a specific target as I played through the narrative, though I would argue Alan's narrative serves this function to some degree anyway. Both sides of the game are great. That's unarguable, they're very well written, so I wouldn't say you can go wrong in terms of order, but my personal recommendation is to switch character every couple chapters. I can imagine for a lot of people, seeing how Alan gets out of the Dark Place was probably the most important factor, but you have to play all of the game either way, and it is still all one narrative, so I can't imagine a world where you aren't better off strategically switching. I'm also pretty sure the part where you see the truth of how Alan gets out it's in the end game portion where you're forced to play chapters in a specific order anyway, so you're really not winning, you know. But that's about all for all the really all-encompassing parts of the game. But it's difficult to choose what to focus on from here without getting too into the nitty-gritty specifics and spoilers. There's so much cool stuff to this game that I want to leave for people to see for themselves. Like, there's the classic survival horror storage boxes are shoeboxes in this game. If you remember the first Alan Wake, you'll know shoeboxes have the bizarre effect of sort of keeping things safe from the Dark Place. In the original, it was just how you got the clicker, and it does still have narrative purpose in the sequel, but now it also stores all those massive 2-space medkits that I have no intention of using. Maybe we should talk about the abundant use of live action to really drive home that wedge between reality and fiction, especially in Alan's half of the game. It's so well done here. Or the boss fights, maybe some of the crazier levels. The fact that Remedy made me jump out of my damn skin every 20 minutes playing Saga. Oh, Jesus fucking... Man, I just wanted to quick say, that gave me a heart attack. So many things. Maybe we should just talk about the spirals. The spirals. But no. Combing through the details of this game are for videos much longer than this one, but know that Remedy are as, if not more, detail-oriented than ever before, and for people who love their other games and really keep their eyes peeled, there's so much fun to be had here in the small things. Something I do want to talk about, though, is the Remedy Connected Universe, a not insignificant part of this game. It's off to a strong start and has the potential to be one of the most impressive undertakings in video game storytelling, in my opinion. I know Control basically started things. The base game has mentions of what happened during and after the events of Alan Wake, and then the AWE expansion actively sets up what Alan is going through during the story of the sequel. But Alan Wake 2 is the first game to officially be a part of this endeavour and actively bring the two together, and it does so well. This part of the video is going to be a tad spoilery, so if you'd rather not know, feel free to skip the time scamp. That's the word I was looking for. I say time scamp. Most simply, the worlds have just been straight up thrown together. The FBC, the Federal Bureau of Control, plays both a hilariously mundane and very active role in the game, with an appearance from Agent Kieran Estevez especially, a name you will know from somewhere if you've read as many of those documents as I have. One slightly more subtle thing I love is that Wake is basically the foremost authority on the Dark Place, right? Then the Dark Presence and the Taken, but the FBC have all their own federal jargon for them, and by the end of the game, Estevez is basically bullied into using all the Wake Code trademarks. I think the word like shades and stuff, which is what the Bureau calls them, is mentioned like once. It's just one of those things that I think adds a really nice dash of personality to the game. But there's so much else. One of the side missions has a background in Control. There's a book by Casper Darling in one of the backstage rooms, and I swear he keeps showing up on the TVs. Bearing in mind, Alan definitely has no idea who Darling is, so he is not a manifestation on Alan's part. I can only guess that, you know, whatever happened to him at the end of Control means he can somehow manifest in the dark, but I have no idea. And the Ocean View Hotel. I have no idea what relation it is to the motel, but I seriously doubt it's a coincidence. And never mind the hotel. Remember the spirals? In the base game of Control, during the many antics within the Ocean View Motel, you can only open the one marked door, the inverted black triangle. During the AW expansion, however, the spiral door briefly opens to give Jesse an insight into Alan's attempted escape with Thomas Sane, interactions that make complete sense after Alan Wake 2. Well, this blasted spiral ain't so inconspicuous now. It can be found all over the game, including one weirdly obvious door in the Valhalla nursing home, and whose room should it be next to but Artie's? If you thought this man's existence was weird in Control, he was just getting started. Now, I have seen that one Gaming University video that explains Artie, but that still doesn't reconcile in my head. It doesn't. Even ignoring the obvious link that to switch realities you have to interact with a bucket in the janitor's cupboard, like that's gotta be something, right? I don't know, but Artie can be found as just a resident of Bright Falls. He's just like around. He refuses to stop cleaning the nursing home he stays at. He goes to the sauna and he very actively doesn't need an assistant. He also gets up on stage and continues singing the same song as if I could ever have forgotten it. He will also jump scare the shit out of you if you try to open the swirly door before the very specifically appointed time in the story. It makes me wonder a lot about just what his connection to the Ocean View actually is. Alan can also find him in the Dark Place, which was really starting to screw with my head. He's seen mopping the only part of the building that seems to be safe. He also calls Alan Tom, which has confused me ever since. Tor and Odin do it as well, but it's just strange. He also helps you, he helps guide you on your way, but that's just kind of Artie's thing, isn't it? I get he's probably just going to appear anywhere where funky reality shit is happening, but my god, he vexes me so much, and I love him. But Artie's not the only character that Alan only meets within the confines of the studio. Wallin Door, wonderfully played by David Hartwood, and also known as a key part to the future of Remedy games. The Mr. Door stuff, it stressed me out. Because it stressed me out so bad, because it really started to get good right before the end of the game. He starts off as an inexplicable talk show host, but he is clearly meant for a substantially bigger role, likely in the hypothetical Alan Wake 3. He seems to have some deeper connection to the Dark Place, and I think he has an even more significant one to the Ocean View than Artie does. I'm sure his name being Door isn't exactly a red herring. One of the characters in the game, Tim Breaker, is mostly here to establish the question and threat of Wallin Door. This is definitely the most active setup they've done for future storylines, even more so, I would argue, than the former in Control. It's a really big effort. So to summarise, for those that have skipped ahead, not only has Remedy's universe gotten off to a really strong start, but there's so much to look forward to. If each game continues to push things the way they have done so far, I think each game is going to only get more exciting. And I, for one, shall be playing every single thing that has their name on it. But on a more overall note, Alan Wake 2 does have a few minor issues, but nothing that seriously drags the game down. It's a few bugs, floating objects, stuff of that caliber. I think the worst thing I had was a boss fight. I beat it and the rest of the thing didn't trigger, but I only had to do the last phase again, so it really wasn't that bad. The biggest thing you'll find people complaining about on the internet, I'd imagine, I actually don't know, I've pulled that out of nowhere, but I can see the most major issue being how the ending is presented. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something that's really going to come down to personal preference. Personally, I loved it, but it leaves us in a very painful place, and it's mostly done through live action, so you don't really play through it. Honestly, we're getting close to the end of the video now. I really don't feel like I have, or if I even can, sing this game's praises highly enough without just spoiling every last second. I truly did love every moment playing it. and I think Remedy are quickly becoming one of my favourite developers, if not my favourite developers. Wherever games become constrained and identified by their genres, Remedy uses them like a playground to create these genuinely insane visual audio experiences that you really don't get anywhere else. I almost feel bad picking Alan Wake 2 to be my game of the year. I don't know why, because it is clearly like one of the best games this year. But we've had so many good releases. It's difficult, it's damn near impossible to pick a favourite. And while we all know Baldur's Gate 3 is almost definitely going to sweep the Game Awards, there's a number of perfectly valid choices that are super hard to argue with, and Alan Wake 2 just happens to be mine. But what is your pick for Game of the Year? There are like 70 good options, so don't be shy to share, even if it is like Hogwarts Legacy, I don't know. Thank you for watching this video so far. I was really struggling with how to make a video on Alan Wake 2. Truthfully, I've been really grappling hard with the question of what kind of videos I actually want to make anyway, but I'm pretty sure I'm getting close. It'll probably be more discussional stuff from now on. If you could let me know what you like about the video, that would be an immense help. I will probably see you in like another month.
That was awesome.